Hi everyone, it's Sonia here. So this week, people were very excited when our media reported that Premier Legault is foreseeing the end of the health emergency in 2022 and the end of the majority of measures. People were very excited, thinking, yay, this is finally ending and we're going to go back to life the way it was before. But unfortunately, that is not what he's talking about. So I'm going to tell you what's happening and how this works. It's not fun, but you need to know. Before I start, I just want to say thanks for liking the video and for leaving me a comment. Thank you for your support on Patreon. I very much appreciate that. Also, please check out the link below for the C60 EVO. You guys, honestly, this is hands down my favorite supplement that I've ever used. This is the one that I've gotten the most results with. My sleep problem is completely turned around. I'm getting really good sleep since I'm taking this. And also I find my skin is looking pretty good. And I also have this, the C60 EVO Advanced Facial Serum. This is a super antioxidant. So it, reverses some of the damage you get. This is ESS C60. So it is specially formulated to be safe for human consumption. And one of the things it does is it makes your body produce more glutathione, which is like a master detoxifier. So if you're interested in the antioxidant and glutathione boosting properties of this C60, please check out the link and you will get a discount. Okay, so let's get into it. I mean, on the surface, it really looked like great news. But then as soon as you start to look into it, you realize it is not what it seems. Legault sees the end of the majority measures and of the health emergency 2022. Yay, that's so wonderful. Francois Legault anticipates that the end of the state of health emergency, which he plans to lift after the vaccination campaign for children aged 5 to 11 at the beginning of 2022, will mean the end of the majority of measures, sanitary conditions imposed on Quebecers. So already we see that actually it's not just going to be lifted just like that. It's going to be after the vaccination of the younger children. And this will mean just the end of the majority of the measures, not all of them. The Prime Minister, however, qualified that according to the evolution of the pandemic and according to the recommendations that will formulate the public health, it is possible that certain measures remain in place. So, absolutely no guarantee. Get your kids vaccinated, but we're not promising anything. It depends how things evolve. It depends what public health says. Some things might stay in place. I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of things. Earlier in the day, the Minister of Health and Social Services, Christian Dubé, was less optimistic. I think it's very clear that the end of the health emergency does not mean the end of health measures. And that is the truth. That is absolutely the fact. What they're telling you here is that, contrary to what many people assume, ending the declaration of emergency doesn't mean going back to normal. It doesn't mean the health measures will be lifted. And I'm going to come back to this article, but I want to show you, I did this video here on BitChute. This happened earlier in Canada, in many other provinces. They revoked the emergency declaration and people thought everything is going to go back to normal, and then it didn't. And I did this video here which explained exactly why. So this article is from today, July 7th. So why do you have, for example, mask mandates still in place for the foreseeable future when the declaration of emergency was revoked or spent June 9th, 2021. Here's an explanation of what's going on according to Randy Hillier, a member of provincial parliament. He says, you may recall on May 31st, the government voted to extend the Reopening Ontario Act to December 2021. This is a completely separate law which conveys the same arbitrary and unilateral emergency authority to the Premier. So while the state of emergency has been lifted, almost all the rules that restrict us remain in force, just under a different act, which is the ROA. And I just want to point out, this happened last year also, where they had lifted the emergency orders, but because they had this Reopening Ontario Act, which, as I say here, received royal assent, meaning it's not coming through the democratic process, but rather through the other line of government we have here, which is the Queen and her representative, the Governor General, and will take effect on a day to be named by proclamation of the Lieutenant Governor. And these people and like governors and council, those are appointed by the Governor General. So this is our, the monarchy branch of our government doing this. So what it does is it provides the government with a mechanism to continue emergency orders issued during the COVID-19 state of emergency declared under the Emergency Act, notwithstanding termination of the declaration of emergency. Once the Reopening Ontario Act takes effect, if the declaration of emergency under the Emergency Act has not already been revoked, it will be terminated at that time pursuant to the Reopening Ontario Act. So this is what happened in Ontario, and Quebec, I guess, doesn't have or didn't have until now a reopening plan, or, the other plan that they will shift to. Like right now they're on emergency declaration and they're ruling by decree. But then when they move away from that, they don't just remove everything, they move to a different kind of plan that replaces the emergency order. And then if at any time things get worse, they can go just right back to the emergency order, the emergency declaration. So it's this kind of shifting back and forth between one way of dealing with the pandemic versus another, but neither of them involves removing all the provisions and all the measures and going back to how life was pre-pandemic. This is what people really need to understand.
I want to be straight with you. There will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future. I repeat, there will be no return to the old normal for the foreseeable future.
So people assume we are just going back to the good old world which we had, and everything will be normal again in how we are used to normal, in the old fashion. This is, let's say, fiction. It will not happen.
A vaccine on its own will not end the pandemic.
As for the vaccination of the children, assuming that it's approved imminently, that doesn't mean that as soon as they roll it out, everything will be lifted and we'll move to this other plan. So even there's some caveats. First of all, there's, getting the doses, then there's the rollout. What is the objective? What percentage of children need to be vaccinated? He didn't say. Is he going to set it at 75 double vaccinated? So you're going to have to wait until all those kids have had their first shot. And then do we wait 3 weeks or 3 months before the second? I don't know. But there will be a delay between the first and the second. And you can expect that he will want all the kids, up to that percentage to get their shots. And based on the history of how he did this with the adults, he said when we got to 75, then the measures would be lifted. We got to 75, he said no, he wants 85. We got to 85, Arruda started saying it might have to be 95 or 100%. So they've been moving the goalposts for the adults the whole time. So we could probably expect that they would do the same for the kids. So we can definitely expect that even with the rollout of the vaccines for the younger kids, it's going to be a few months before those goals are met. And probably the goalposts will be moved a few times. And then, like he said, depending on how things go and depending on the advice of public health, some measures could remain in place. So assuming you get the kids vaccinated, but then maybe there's another variant that start affecting older people again, you can be sure he's going to say, no, we're not ending the emergency, or we're not removing the measures. So it's the more you find out, the less it looks optimistic, to be honest. The opposition parties demand that the state of emergency be lifted now, while it allows Quebec to have extraordinary powers without consulting the National Assembly, thanks to the Public Health Act. Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon of the Parti Québécois says he thinks that the government prefers to decide by decree. So what we've seen from other provinces was that as they switch from the emergency to whatever else replaces it, it definitely doesn't mean that things that are already in place will be removed. Actually, these kind of acts that they pass, or I'm not sure if it's even an act, actually, I think it was just sort of decreed by the governors and council, it was just sort of put in place. It's not done like through the legislative process. Well, whatever these laws are, these things that they put in place, what in other provinces, what they provided for was that whatever measures were already in place would stay in place, but that no additional measures could be added. For example, if you have a vaccination passport that is being used, that's mandatory, and you switch to this other kind of plan, it doesn't mean you're going to get rid of the passport. It means that it stays because it was part of the measures that were already in force. See what I'm saying? If before they remove the emergency, or at that time they decide that when the emergency is revoked, people no longer have to wear masks, then that becomes part of the plan. The masks are gone. If they don't do that, then the masks can stay. I'm pretty sure that in this transition, it will not involve removing the vaccination passport, because it was a huge project. A lot of money has gone into it, a lot of design, all kinds of strategies have had to be developed. It was a big project. I don't think they would have put that much effort into it if they didn't intend to keep it. And also the fact that it's now being used in every province, and that it's required for travel on a train or a plane, or to leave the country. And the fact that Justin Trudeau wants to give $1 billion to every province to help them set this up. Obviously, if they're investing that much time and effort into this system, it's not because it's going to be gone in a couple of months. Personally, I think their intention with the vaccination passport is to keep it forever, like literally forever. And I think that they would see it as a useful tool to which they could later add other criteria, such as your boosters or possibly other things. But I don't think that they're going to get rid of it. So, you keep that in mind. When they say ending the health emergency, ending the majority of measures, measures maybe like some capacity measures, maybe masking, stuff like that. Not the passport. That's probably going to stay. So I think that at this point, a lot of Quebecers feel like they've been getting jerked around by their government, because it started out with 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Then it was 28-day défi 28 jours, like give it everything you've got for 28 days. We're going to overcome this. Then it was another 28. I think it was another 28 after that. And we kept doing it, with a lot of solidarity. We're putting our best effort. You're just hunkering down and just dealing with it. And then instead of getting better, we had a curfew. And that was supposed to be an electroshock, which turned into several months. It was in January, and I think it was only lifted like in May. So we ended up with a curfew for months. So again, it didn't turn out at all the way he said. He had also said when it was 75% vaccination rate, things would change. And that was changed, like I said before, changed again. Now it's got to be the kids. I mean, really, who believes him at this point? I think a lot of people don't. I mean, what is it that they say about politicians? How do you know when a politician is lying? His lips are moving. I think a lot of people just feel like Legault just says whatever he thinks people want to hear, and then he does whatever he wants. We can get some idea of what direction this is heading by this article from TVA Nouvelle, which it's really just someone's opinion, but it's entitled, "We Must Already Think About the Start of the 2022 School Year," where they are interviewing the teacher Simon Landry, a teacher from the metropolitan region, which I guess means Montreal. So what he is proposing is that we need to come up with a new plan, a new reorganization for the 2022-2023 school year. What kind of measures will be in place once the children have had the opportunity to protect themselves, meaning get vaccinated? Will there still be measures at school? What will happen to the children who are not vaccinated? The right to public education is fundamental in our society, but the government will have to adjust the ways of fulfilling this obligation. So what he is proposing is focus on virtual school. And he is saying that the Ministry of Education should develop, first of all, a Quebec virtual school that this virtual school must be offered in the same way for all children in the province and available for all levels. That the in-person school should require vaccination. The minister should then announce that adequate vaccination, both for students and staff, will be mandatory in order to attend schools at the start of the 2022 school year. So basically, parents who refuse the vaccine for their child will have the right to free public education thanks to the Quebec virtual school. So any child that doesn't get vaccinated will not be allowed to attend school in person in 2022. This is just the opinion of this teacher, but TVA Nouvelle thinks it's worth doing a whole article on it, which kind of gives you the idea that this is maybe what they want the public to start considering. So staff who refuse the vaccine, including teachers, would also be redirected to virtual school. Those who choose not to be vaccinated or not to have their children vaccinated would be given a reasonable period of time to comply. A tax credit for homeschooling could be introduced. So they'd have to set themselves up with homeschooling, allowing families to obtain necessary computer equipment and pay part of the bill related to the internet connection if they choose to stay home. Not that that's the only issue for parents who are homeschooling. Financially, the fact that you can't go to work tends to be a bigger problem, but I guess that's not his concern. The last 2 years of school have been very trying for students. We cannot afford to face another year like this, right? Because your only option is send the unvaccinated on virtual school, or continue to have bubbles and masking and other onerous measures imposed on the children. With a little political courage and planning, it is possible to restore our young people to a truly normal school once and for all. The kids that are vaccinated deserve to have a truly normal school once and for all. And the kids that are not vaccinated, too bad for them. They're just going to have to make do with sitting at home in front of a computer, isolated and unable to have any other social contact or interaction. So I thought that this was interesting, that this is actually something that is published in a mainstream Quebec paper, that maybe a lot of people are going to look at this and go, yeah, that makes sense. Well, we'll see how that turns out. Now, here is a hurdle that's going to have to be overcome, which is that more than a quarter of Quebec parents are against vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds, according to a study. 22% of parents say they completely disagree with vaccinating young kids. Well, 22% do not wish to have their kids vaccinated. Another 5% disagree with vaccination somewhat. So now we're up to 27%. And then another 10% are unsure. So it's like almost 30% that either are completely against it or more or less against it. So generally, we're a lot more sensitive to risks for our children than ourselves. And that's true for all vaccines, says Yves Dubé, an anthropologist and scientific advisor at the INSPQ. That's kind of weird. I thought that the risk was that the kids would get COVID. Why would they be sensitive to risks for the vaccine? I thought that it was safer to get the vaccine than to get COVID. Side effects that are minor could be perceived as riskier, more serious, or even dangerous. What about the side effects of having COVID, though? Like, what happened here? But this is the fact. People are worried about giving it to their kids. They're not comfortable with it. So some of those people will probably come around, because apparently for the teens, when they first surveyed them, 82% were on board, 14% were against it. But now the vaccination rate for teens is 90%. But still, basically, whatever we went through with ourselves, the adults, and our teens, we're going to go through that whole thing now with the 5 to 11s. And then I would be willing to guess that by the time that's done, it'll be time for booster shots for the adults and the teens. And then we're going to have to do that again, because there's going to be some people who are not on board. So to me, it looks like... actually, we're certainly not out of the woods. Looks like this is here to stay. So I wanted to share this with you because a lot of people think, oh, hey, great news, this is over. But actually, it's really not. Actually, there's a lot of fine print to it. Let's put it that way. So I hope that's useful information to you. And thanks for leaving me a comment and hitting like. And thanks again for your support on Patreon. And thank you for checking out the links for the C60 and also the C60 facial serum. And that's it, you guys. I'm always happy to see you in the chat. I hope you're all doing well. I hope your faith is strong and that things are going okay for you. And so I pray that God will bless you and that his peace might be with you. And that's it. Thanks for listening to me, and I'll see you next time.